Good morning, everyone. I'm Ritu Shinde, co-team member of Revolution Software Development Club. I welcome you all to this workshop on the Angular framework. This workshop is hosted under the Department of Computer Engineering of Vishwakarma University, and we hope that you will find this workshop useful. Now, let me invite Karan Jagtian. He is the president of our club, and he will be conducting the workshop for you guys today. Good morning, Karan. Over to you.
Thank you, Ritu. So, first of all, I am very excited to conduct this workshop on Angular because this framework is very near and dear to me as I have used this framework in all of my projects in the tech stack. So, yes, I'm very excited to conduct this workshop today, and I hope that every one of you watching right now is excited too. So, before we get into the technical part of the workshop, I would like to tell you guys a little uh, brief about what the Angular framework is, why it should be used instead of the conventional methods like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and how it can be used for building very high scalable production applications. So, yes, welcome to the Angular workshop under the Department of Computer Engineering by the Revolution Software Development Club. So, let's get into it. So, what is Angular? Angular is a TypeScript based framework. So, a lot of you might have heard about Angular JS. So, at the end of Angular, they have the JS. So, what does that mean? And what is just Angular? So, we will get into that also. But for now, we need to know that it is a TypeScript based framework and not a JavaScript based framework, what we will be learning today. And it is a completely open source framework and it is developed and maintained by Google as of now. So the current maintenance, it was initially developed by Google itself. So yes, and also it is used for building dynamic and scalable applications. So when we get into the technical part of the workshop, you will understand as to what exactly those two words mean, dynamic and scalable. We'll get into that. We don't need to know the exact definition. We will learn it through practical usage. So as I said, Angular, the latest Angular framework, that is a TypeScript based framework. So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is a programming language which is the superset to JavaScript. So what does a superset mean? Just like C++ is a superset to C. So any code will run in C++. This it's the same. Any JavaScript code will entirely run in TypeScript program in the TypeScript programming language. So that is basically a script is. So TypeScript is the superscript to the JavaScript programming language. And as we know that JavaScript is the programming language for building the logical side of any web application. So TypeScript is the superscript to that. And also one point to note, JavaScript is an interpreted programming language, as we had learned this in our JavaScript workshop, which was conducted last month. If you did not attend that, so I would encourage you to watch it later. That entire workshop is uploaded on our YouTube channel. So you can watch that workshop in order to understand what JavaScript is and how it can be used. Because if you don't understand JavaScript, you won't be able to understand TypeScript. And Angular is a TypeScript based framework. So you won't be able to understand a lot of the things we will be doing in our technical workshop today. So yes, and TypeScript is developed and maintained by Microsoft. Also, as I mentioned, all JavaScript code is valid within a TypeScript file. So yes. So what is Angular JS? A lot of times we have heard Angular JS. Sometimes we only hear Angular. So I have seen a lot of people using both the terms interchangeably as if they are both the same. So let me tell you guys that they are not the same. There is a difference between Angular and Angular JS. So first of all, Angular JS is a was a framework developed by Google itself, and it is still available on the internet. But the support for it is has been discontinued by Google. So initially it started as Angular JS, It was a framework, and that was a JavaScript based framework. So there are some differences between Angular JS and Angular. So basically, Angular JS runs in JavaScript and Angular runs in TypeScript. So there are a lot of advantages that the framework has over AngularJS, as Angular was the next version of AngularJS that was released later. So some of the it's not like AngularJS is completely disadvantageous. It also has its own advantages, but Angular is mostly uh, Angular is mostly preferred by the developers, as that is the latest framework and it is currently supported by Google. So using AngularJS, it does not support any mobile browsers. So if you create a AngularJS application, so r- trying to run that in a mobile browser is a little difficult because it does not support all the mobile browsers. It's not like it does not support any mobile browsers. It does, but it has some limitations. But Angular, on the other hand, it is supported by all the popular mobile browsers like Safari, Mozilla Firefox, Chrome, etc. So currently, the Angular JS, the latest stable version. So latest stable version basically means that it has been approved by their team for using it in production. So there are no bugs, like no known bugs that would cause you any big problems. So the latest stable version is 1.8 for Angular JS, and the latest stable version for Angular is 10.1.4, which we will be using in today's workshop. We won't be using AngularJS. We will be using the latest framework by Google, which is Angular 10. Then also Angular is a framework and it comes with a CLI, basically a command line interface. So command line interface with this CLI, you get a lot of tools that Angular provides you, and the development cycle becomes much easier using these tools. So that is another reason why Angular is advantageous, because the maintaining the code, the development cycle, everything becomes much easier because this is a framework and it comes with a lot of libraries built in, as in it comes within the package itself. You don't have to install anything externally. But on the other hand, if we look at AngularJS, it heavily relies on third-party tools for it to work. So this, you can say, is not entirely a framework. You can call this a library. So yes, it relies on heavily on third party tools. Then another advantage that Angular has over AngularJS is that the Angular code is compiled. It is compiled entirely, and currently there was a new compiler introduced in Angular 9. So initially there were some bugs with the IV compiler. It's called as the IV compiler. And when it was released initially with Angular 9, it was not backwards compatible. As in, if you had any project created in Angular 8, let's say, and you tried to compile it using the new compiler, with the IV compiler in Angular 9, so it would give you some issues with compatibility. So now that those issues also have been fixed, and currently in the latest stable version, in the 10th Angular version, the IV compiler is backwards compatible and is not giving any errors if you try to compile a Angular 8 project, let's say. So it is a compiled application. So what does a compiled application mean? Compiled, if it is entirely compiled, your application, so running that becomes much faster, while execution of that program, it is much faster compared to no pre-compilation. On the other hand, JavaScript, Angular JS, the JavaScript framework, there is no compilation done for this. So it is much slower compared to the Angular framework, but it's not like it is completely disadvantageous for Angular JS, because Angular has to ship its entire compiler with your web application, and that compiler is not that small in size. It has its own weight in your application. So while shipping your application, you also have to ship the IV compiler or the previous compiler. So if we compare the Angular, if you compare the Angular 8. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both the sides, but Angular, the latest framework, is preferred because if we look at it, it is on the 10th version right now. And as it is a TypeScript based framework, so TypeScript also provides a lot of advantages over JavaScript. As not only is it a superset of JavaScript, but also it it is a compiled language, and secondly, it's a strongly typed language. So if we are familiar with JavaScript, if you guys attended our previous workshop, so in JavaScript we saw that as it is interpreted, the data types of the variables, they don't have to be declared. As in, I don't have to say that my variable, let's say k, is an integer or is a number or is a string. I don't have to declare that. I can just assign it a value and it will dynamically get the data type. But that may be advantageous in some cases, getting the data dynamically. But in production level applications, when your code becomes very large, it gets difficult to debug your application. And for debugging, it is much better to get errors beforehand instead of getting runtime errors. So getting compilation errors is much better because you get to know that, okay, the data type which I am passing does not match the data type which has to be accepted. So if we get this error during the compilation phase only, so we won't be getting any runtime errors later down in the code. So you can imagine a very large code base, and if we are using JavaScript, we don't know what data types are being passed, what data types should be accepted. So this issue, this is the main issue which TypeScript solves, as that is not only compiled programming language, but also a strongly typed programming language. And it also provides a lot of object-oriented concepts out of the box. So those are also advantages. We'll look into that when we get into the technical part. So yes, these were the differences between the Angular framework, which is the 10th version right now, and the Angular JS framework, which for the support has been stopped long time ago. And but it's not like companies don't use Angular JS, because when it came out, a lot of companies started using Angular JS. And porting from Angular JS to Angular is very difficult. So there are still a lot of websites which run Angular JS. But if you are to start a new startup right now, or if you want to build a new website and you want to use a framework, so if you're doing it right now, so I would highly recommend the Angular framework and not the Angular JS framework. And we will see as to how exactly Angular is so powerful and how it can be used to make our web pages highly dynamic and scalable. So yes. So which are the companies that use Angular? So as you can see, a lot of big names are over here: Google, Microsoft, IBM, PayPal, Walmart, and BMW. All of these big companies, they use Angular somewhere in their tech stack. Google heavily uses it. The Gmail application, that is entirely, the front end is entirely built using Angular. And once we see how Angular is working, like how the code works, then we will be able to understand, okay, yes, we will be able to relate as to how Gmail is using it. We can see those features that we learned today. We can see those features in action on the Gmail application, as most of us use Gmail for emailing to anyone. So yeah, we will see those. Then yes, Microsoft, IBM, PayPal, Walmart, BMW. So yeah, BMW, a lot of its applications, like whether it be a store locator for their car showrooms. So their store locator, that is also built using Angular. So yeah, these are just some of the companies. There are a lot more. A lot of big names are there, but I just thought of mentioning few of these. And why am I mentioning as to who uses Angular? So because these big companies, they use Angular, so there are obviously a lot of job opportunities. in the front-end web design area because they use Angular in their tech stack. And if we are familiar with the Angular framework, so it would be much easier for us to be part of any of these companies because we are familiar with their tech stack. They don't have to provide us any extra training. So that is the advantage that we get by learning this framework. So that is one of the reasons why we we wanted to cover the Angular framework as we know that it is heavily used in the industry. So yes, now we can get into the technical part of the workshop. So let's begin. Let me close down my presentation and I will go to I have created this folder, and within this folder, we will be creating a new Angular project. But before we create a new Angular project, I would just like to revise as to how the prerequisites for this workshop have to be installed. So the first prerequisite is the Node.js software. We need the Node.js software, and for that you have to download the installer provided on their website. So that link is given down in the description box below. You can, if you haven't installed it already, you can go to that link and download the installer according to your device, whether it be 64-bit, 32-bit, Windows, Linux, whatever. So you can download the Node.js installer and install that software. After installing Node.js, there is a command that we need to execute within a command prompt. Open a command prompt anywhere and just check if your npm is installed or not by saying npm dash dash version. So this this will give you a version number. So currently npm version is 6.14.8. So here, if it does not say that this npm is not recognized, if it gives that error, so it was not installed correctly. But if it doesn't, if it gives a number like this, so we can know that, okay, it was installed correctly. So now we can go ahead with the next step, which is to install the Angular CLI. So CLI basically means a command line interface. And what a command line interface does is that it provides you a lot of tools for you to use. So we will see what those tools are. So yeah, once you know that npm is working, you need to say npm dash dash save install add angular slash CLI at latest. So I won't be running this command because Angular is already installed and the Angular CLI is already installed on my machine. I won't be running this command. And also this command is given down in the description box below. So once you install the Node.js software, you can go ahead and just copy and paste that command in a command prompt. So once it takes some time to install the Angular CLI because it's a very big package. It takes some time, but once it is installed, you can go ahead and say ng dash dash version. So ng is the command used for running any tool within the Angular CLI. And see, once this is executed, ng dash dash version, it says Angular CLI in this very cool looking text format within the command prompt. And here it gives you the version number, the Node.js version, and the operating system which you are using. So yes, Angular CLI. So if you can see ng dash dash version, if it gives you an output like this, so Angular was also successfully installed on your system. And once both of these things are installed, Node.js and Angular, we can go ahead with creating a basic Angular project. So initially we'll create a basic Angular project. So for that, wherever you want to create your project, go over there and open a command prompt. So I will open a command prompt in this folder. I want to create my Angular application over here. So in this folder, I will open a command prompt. And in this command prompt, I will say ng space new space Angular dash src. So what does this mean? Ng means we are running a Angular command The full form of NG is actually next generation, because frameworks like Angular are the next generation of web development. So thus NG. Then space new. So new means creating a new project, and space, you have to provide the name of your Angular project. So in this case, you can call it whatever you want. You can give it your own name. You can call it Hello World. You can call it anything. But I will be calling my project as Angular -src. So I won't be running this command again, because initializing a new project in Angular takes some time, and I don't want us to wait for that to happen. So that is why I have already ran that command. And after the entire execution of that command takes place, this new folder is created within the folder where you created your where you opened your command prompt. So here a new folder was created called as Angular SRC. That is the name which I gave. So this is basically how it would look. I just took a screenshot of that. Once you run ng new Angular SRC, so here it will ask you two questions. After you run this command, it will ask you two questions. The first question would be, would you like to add Angular routing? So there you have to press Y as in Y for yes, and press enter. Then after that, it will ask you another question, which style sheet format would you like to use? So over there, you get 5 total options for using the type of style sheet. So let me tell you in a little detail about the different style sheets there are. So one is CSS, which we already know. Then the next is SCSS. Then another is SAS or SASS. Then another styling format is LESS, and another styling format is stylus. So these are all different flavors of CSS. So we don't need to learn all the flavors of CSS. Just learn one and stick to that. It's not like prefer using the SCSS format, which again is the superset to CSS. So basically, any CSS code will be valid in a .scss file. But SCSS provides some other features as well. We won't get into that today, but there are a lot of features that SCSS provides, which can be used with your existing CSS code as well. So, and anyways, your entire CSS will be able to run within the SCSS file. So why not go with the higher version itself? Because later we might need to use SCSS. So that is the reason why I always go with SCSS. After you select SCSS, then a lot of different files will be created by the Angular CLI. See, a lot of files are created. So don't be too afraid by the number of files that are created. Most of these files are helper files for the Angular project to run. So we don't get into most of the files there are over here. We stick to only some specific files and folders where we work. So we don't be too scared with the structure that Angular will be creating. And once this is done, it takes few minutes to complete the installation. So once it is done, it will create this folder called as Angular SRC. So once your project has been created, you need to cd into that. So I'll just say Angular-src. So now I am currently in the Angular SRC folder. So basically this folder. So once you are in this folder, you can run another command, which is ng-serve, ng space serve. So let this command run. So see, as it was saying, compiling, and it is giving us the percentage of compilation that has been completed till now, 50%. It is initializing all the modules, setting up everything, and in a few seconds, it says compiled successfully. Compiled successfully. So once your application has been compiled, after it is compiled, it will be hosted on this link, http://localhost:4200. So 4200 is the port number. You can change the port number as you wish. The default port number is 4200, so we'll stick to that only. And if I open a web browser, Chrome, which we will be using in our workshop today. So if you go to this link, localhost colon 4200, so you get this very nice looking web page. It is a single page and there are few buttons. Basically, this web page was created by the Angular CLI itself. They have generously provided us a basic web page for us to get not only some reference as to how the code would look inside an Angular project, how our HTML code would look, but also they have provided the documentation links over here. So you can directly click on anything and you will get to see the documentation which Angular has. So yes, this is a basic web page provided by the Angular CLI itself. We did not even start coding. We did not even open a IDE. We did not see any of the files. We directly ran this link. We went to this link and we can see this basic Angular page created. So now for this workshop, we will be using the Visual Studio Code IDE, as we have used this same IDE in our previous workshops as well, the web design workshop as well as the JavaScript workshop. So as I already mentioned that all these three things, HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and JavaScript as well, all of these things, they are a prerequisite to this workshop. So if there are some things that you don't understand in this workshop, so I would encourage you to go and watch our previous workshop videos. Both of them are completely free and available on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't watched them already, and if you face any problems in this workshop, then I would encourage you to go and watch those videos after this one. So yes, yeah. So within the Visual Studio Code IDE, this is the project folder, which we ourselves only named Angular SRC. So in this folder, there are a lot of different folders and files. There are a lot of JSON files. There are some JS files. There are config files. So it might be a little confusing at the beginning, but let me tell you that don't at all be scared or don't at all be afraid of these files, because you may think that I don't know what these are. So it's okay. It's okay to not know about what every file does in your application, because most of the files, they are the helper files for the Angular CLI to serve your project application. They are there to build your application. So we don't have to get into all the files. So we will be sticking to only some of the files there are in this project structure. So the main folder where we will be writing our code is the SRC folder. And within this SRC folder, you can see there are a lot of different folders and a lot of different files. So first, let's take a look at the index.html file. So this is the index.html file. This is the entry point of your application. Basically, if you were to serve this on a server, if you were to run this on a server, your server would direct your route to this page, the index.html page. This is the page where everything starts rendering. This is the page where everything begins in your Angular project. But you may think that there is a lot of markup given in this page, which we can see right now, localhost colon 4200. You can see there is a lot of markup. There are a lot of buttons. There is a lot of different styling as well. So where is that? Where are those things? So if you take a look over here, in the body tag, we have this another tag, which is app-root. App-root. So this app-root points to a component in your Angular project. It points to a component in your Angular project, and we can see that component over here, which for the folder it is named as app itself. So if we go in this folder, we can see there are a lot of different files. there is, let me just expand this a little bit. Yes. So there are a lot of files. App-routing.module.ts, app.component.html, app.component.scss. Remember, we selected SCSS. So that is why the .scss extension. This is basically where you would put your styling, not in this file, but in a .scss file. You would put your styling for your application. Then we have a component.spec.ts, component.ts, and module.ts. So if we take a look at the component.ts, here we can see this component has been given a selector of app-root. So basically, this component app.component.html, and here you can see the entire markup of the page which we looked at in the beginning. This is the entire markup. This looks like something like this is built up. We can see there is a lot of markup over here, around 500 lines. So yes, this is the markup for this page. It also has, within the same HTML file, it has the style tag. So the styling is also done in this page itself. So this page is being called in this index.html through app-root. This component is being called over here. So this is another big feature of Angular. Basically, Angular is a framework for building progressive single page applications. Remember these keywords, progressive single page applications. So your entire Angular project or your entire Angular web application, it is just a single page application. Everything is rendered within the same page. You don't go to a different page. So if you remember from our web workshop, the web design workshop, there we had linked a few different files. There were about file, about page, registration page, login page. So all of these files were linked to our homepage through the href tag. And what href does is it takes you to a different page. It takes you to a different HTML page. So in Angular, there is nothing called as href. I mean, you can use it, but there is no purpose of using href because it is a single page application. Everything is rendered within the same page. So we will see as to how that works. So basically, yes, it is a single page application and you are just calling the component. So similarly, this app.component.html, it comes with these files. So this was a component provided by the Angular CLI itself. It comes out of the box. So similarly, we can create our own components. So we'll get into that later as to how we can create our own components. But for now, we need to remember that Angular, the components in Angular, that is one of the biggest features that Angular provides, and that is how a Angular project is made a single page application. So yes, this is the web page, and this is the command prompt where you can see the Angular application being compiled and all the different files that it is serving. So here in the green text, we can see that there are some different files. So there is main.js, there is polyfills.js, runtime.js, styles.js, and vendor.js. So as we know that JavaScript, that is the logical language used for building logic in your web applications. So at the end, it will always serve the .js files itself. So in the main.js file, we have our own code. We have our entire markup as well, and that is completely written inside the JavaScript file. So at the end, we don't really have any HTML files except this one, index.html. Other than this, as this is the entry point, other than this, we don't have any other HTML files. I mean, when we are developing the application, so yes, we have multiple HTML files, but while building it in production or while serving it on a server, we don't have HTML files. Everything is written within the JavaScript files itself. So if you remember, again, I will give a reference to our previous workshop. Over there, we saw that there is a property to a element we can write in JavaScript called as inner HTML. So if you guys remember, there is this property called as inner HTML. And through that property, we can write the HTML markup within the JavaScript file itself. So that is not exactly how Angular does it. There are some other methods that it does it with, but for us to understand on an abstract level, on a higher level, we just need to know that only JavaScript files are served and the HTML is also served within the JavaScript file itself. So yes, that is the purpose of main.js. Then polyfills.js. So another feature of Angular is that, as I said, it is backwards compatible. So what does backwards compatible mean? It is compatible with the previous versions. So this polyfills.js, this file makes your Angular project not only compatible with different browsers like Chrome, Firefox, IE, etc., but also makes it compatible with the different versions of those browsers. It not only makes it compatible with the different browsers, but also different versions of those browsers. So there is a code written for that to make it compatible with all these browsers. So that code is written within the polyfills.js file. Then next, if we look at the runtime.js, this this file is we don't need to get into too much detail of this file. Basically, this file contains the Webpack loader. So basically, while serving it on a development phase, it is not compiling it entirely. It is serving it. So we don't need to get into too much detail of this file. Then styles.js, again, your styling is also written in the JS file. Your styling is also written in the JS file, but there is a main style sheet in your project for uh, in production phase as well. There is one style sheet, but the style other style sheets which are linked, they are linked through JavaScript itself. So that linking is written in this file, and then finally the vendor.js file. This this file contains the external library code that we would be using in our project. So on the right side in gray color, they have also mentioned the size of these files. So main.js is 59.7 kilobytes, runtime styles, everything is given. Then vendor.js is 2.62 megabytes. So we haven't even started coding our own project in the Angular project that we just created. But even we did not do that, we still have a vendor.js of 2.6 megabytes. So this is already a very large file. So we will see why that is very large from the get-go, why it is very large out of the box. We will see that. But the reason why I explained all of these files and what they do is that you should know what these files are. We should know what they are and what their purpose is, because we may not open those files anytime soon, or we may not be using those files directly, but we should know what the purpose of those files are. So yes, these were the files that are served while serving your application. So ngserve, this ngserve command basically serves your project on this default port number on localhost. You can also provide a specific IP address and also a specific port if you want. By default, it goes to localhost 4200. And over here, your development phase project is served. So the project which is served right now, that is not used in production applications. There is a different command for building your project in production. So you will see that later, but this is just used for development, ngserve. So as we did that, as we ran this command, we can see our application being rendered at this URL. So now let's get into the coding part. First of all, I don't want any of this markup in my project. I'll just remove that and I will hit Control S for save. I will hit Control S. After I hit Control S, it automatically compiled it again because it saw that a change was made. And as a change was made, it compiled the application again. And if we go to our browser, it is empty right now because we removed the entire markup. So basically what it did, it compiled it automatically and it also refreshed the browser. So this is another beauty of the Angular CLI. it is able to detect that a change has been made when we hit Control S or when we save the file. It is able to detect that. It is also able to compile it again, and it also refreshes the page which you are serving it up. So everything is done very quickly, very seamlessly. You just have to code, save, and just look at the browser. That's it. That's how seamless it is to start writing your Angular project, to start building your Angular project. So how that is how seamless it is. So now what I will do is I'll just type something over here, hello world. I'll hit save. If we go to our browser again, see it is refreshing and you can see hello world. I'm not sure if it is visible or not. I'll just zoom in a little bit. Hello world. This is there. I just had to hit Control S. So yes, hello world. So before we start using the features that Angular provides, like the dynamic features, the scalable features that it provides, before we start doing that, I want to include Bootstrap into my Angular project. So including a framework like Bootstrap or any other framework that is normally recommended for building such projects, because these frameworks provide you the mobile first approach. They provide you the way of seamlessly writing HTML markup, and also having that HTML markup be compatible not only with the mobile browsers but also the desktop browsers. So this this feature is expected nowadays in all the applications. It is expected from scratch. They don't tell you that this is supposed to be done. It has to be done. It is a given. So Bootstrap is a very essential framework that has to be included. And there are other frameworks like Bootstrap as well, but I personally prefer Bootstrap. So that is what we will be including in our project today. So just to show you, I will create a button over here, and I will give it a class of BTN and BTN danger. So normally if we give our button these two classes, I'll just say click me. Yeah, normally if we give our button these two classes, it will create a decent looking button. It will give it the color red because we gave the danger class. So if I hit save, go back to our browser, I just get click me, and this is a normal HTML button. There is no Bootstrap added to it. So we can see that Bootstrap is not included in our project yet. So let's include Bootstrap into our Angular project. So for that, first of all, we need to download the Bootstrap library. So normally there are multiple methods of including Bootstrap. In our web workshop, I have explained that as to how we can include Bootstrap in our web projects. So there are two methods. We can just directly include it using the CDN, which is the file provided through their content delivery network, CDN, or we can download that file in our local machine so that we don't have to rely on their CDN. And we can download those files, and instead of including that CDN in every file, we can have these files downloaded and linked with every file that we use. So downloading it and linking it with your Angular project is the recommended method of doing it. So first of all, we need to download the Bootstrap framework in our project. So how can we do that? So remember that we installed Node.js in our system. Node.js comes with this tool called as npm. npm stands for Node Package Manager. And what this is used for, it is used for downloading external libraries, external frameworks like Bootstrap or any other framework that you may be using in your project. So there are a lot of libraries available on the internet that you may require in your project, just like Bootstrap. So most of them, they are downloaded using the Node Package Manager itself. So in order to install Bootstrap, I will say npm install, then -- save Bootstrap, then jquery, and also popper.js. So let me explain this command. Npm Node Package Manager install as in download those files. Then I I have put dash dash save. So dash dash save, this basically means that normally whenever we create a node project, it comes with a package.json file. So in this package.json file, the dependencies or the libraries which you are using are mentioned and their version number is mentioned. So this is done in order to make the CLI understand as to what all libraries you want to include in this current project, because there may be thousands of libraries that you have downloaded, but you only use hundreds out of them, hundreds of those thousands. So it will not serve every single library that you download. It will only serve the libraries which you have mentioned in the package.json file. So we say dash dash save so that the Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js, those are included in this dependencies value, key value. So dependency is the key and the value is this object. And within this, those libraries will be mentioned automatically. We don't have to come here and explicitly mention their name and their version number. So that is basically why we say dash dash save. And these are the three libraries that I want to install: Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js. So in the web workshop, I had explained that these two are the prerequisites of Bootstrap. So in order for Bootstrap to work, you also have to download these two. So I'll just hit enter. Also, this command is also given down in the description box below. So you don't have to type it out. You can just copy and paste from our description box and let it run. It takes a few seconds to install. It won't take that long. Let's wait for it to install. So yes, it has completed the installation process of installing these three packages that we mentioned: Bootstrap, jQuery, popper.js. So here there are some warnings that are given by the node package manager. We don't have to worry about that right now. And here you can see plus jQuery, the version number at 3.5.1, plus Bootstrap at 4.5.3. So it is giving us the confirmation that yes, all of these three packages have been added in our Angular projects. They have been downloaded. So just downloading these three files is not enough for your uh, Angular application to be linked with the Bootstrap framework. So that is not enough. We have to do, see, in this package.json file, you can see Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js were added with their version numbers. They were added automatically because of that dash dash save command. And since they are added over here, once we serve the project, the node package manager would know that I have to use these three libraries as well. So they were added, but they were added. That does not mean that Bootstrap will start working in my project. It will not, because Bootstrap still has not been linked with our Angular project, and we need to link that. So in order to link Bootstrap with your Angular project, I will just collapse everything. We will go to the root folder of our project, and here you can find a file called as angular.json. Angular.json. This is another JSON file maintained by Angular, and this is another file which is used to help Angular build the project. It is used to help Angular serve the project. There are details, there are configuration aspects given in this file. So yeah, don't get too afraid by looking at this JSON file. It's okay if you don't understand every single thing. We won't be touching most of it anyways. So we only worry about two different things in this angular.json file. One is this styles array and another is this scripts array. One is the styles array and one is the scripts array. It is just, it is not that down the file. It is, if you just scroll a little bit, you can see these two arrays. And in this arrays, we have to include the path of the Bootstrap module. We have to include the path of it. So here, I will just say a comma, and now I need to provide the path to Bootstrap. So whenever we use the node package manager npm to install anything, it is normally saved in a folder called as node underscore modules. So in this node modules, you can see there are a lot of different folders. There are a lot of folders. And this is what I was talking about, that Angular out of the box comes with a lot of different libraries. And that is the reason why our vendor.js file was so huge. That is because of this reason only. It has a lot of different dependencies. So when you install the CLI and when you create a new project through that CLI, it installs all these packages by default. So when we ran the npm command for installing Bootstrap, Bootstrap was also added in this folder itself. So we just need to find it. Yeah, here it is. So you can see the Bootstrap file is added over here. I'll just make it a little bigger. Yeah, so Bootstrap, you can see that Bootstrap folder was added. So we need to give the path to the Bootstrap file. So in this, you can see there are different folders. So go in the dist folder. Within the CSS folder, you can see there is a file called as bootstrap.main.css. So we just need to provide the link, the path of that file. So I'll just say node underscore modules, node underscore modules. Then we went into the Bootstrap folder. Then after the Bootstrap folder, I believe we went into the dist folder, dist. Then after that, we went into the CSS folder. Then after that, we need to link this file. So I'll just toggle my word wrap and I'll say bootstrap.min.css. So let's just confirm everything, like all the spellings are correct. So node underscore modules, bootstrap, dist, CSS, bootstrap.min.css. I believe this is correct. So similarly, we also have to link the JS files. So in the scripts array, we need to link the bootstrap.js file. So I'll just copy and paste that. And instead of going to CSS over here, we'll go to JS. So dist/js. And within the JS folder, we have bootstrap.min.js. So just change CSS to JS. So as we know that jQuery is a prerequisite to Bootstrap, we need to include jQuery as well. So as it is a prerequisite, it has to be linked before the Bootstrap is linked. It has to be linked before Bootstrap is linked because it is a prerequisite. So again, I will go in this node modules folder only and I will try to find the jQuery folder so we can manually type out the reference link to it. So if I go J, okay, I'm in J now. Yes, so here we can see the jQuery folder is there. So within the, I'll again say node modules /jQuery /this /jQuery.min.js .min.js. So you may be wondering that why am I going through these files manually and why am I typing out these links? You can just copy and paste this, right? So the reason why I did this manually in front of you guys is so that you understand as to what npm is, what the node modules folder is, and how we can go ahead and link any different module that we are using, and how we don't have to rely on the internet to provide us the reference link. We can go over there manually and we can take a look at the different files it offers. We can open the file itself. We can take a look at the source code because it is open source. We can take a look at the source code and then we can provide the link to it ourselves. So that is why I showed it to you manually. Now I'll just make the font size a little smaller so it's easier to see the code now. So yes, I believe that bootstrap.min.css, jquery.min.js, and bootstrap.min.js, all of them have been linked. So let's serve our application again. ng serve. Let's wait for it to execute. By that time, I will just collapse everything. I will come out of the node modules folder, as that is a very complicated folder and there are a lot of libraries. So we don't want to get lost in that folder. So I'll just collapse it. Now let's wait for it to compile 50%, 93%, and it is compiled. So now we will refresh this page. So yeah, now you can see this button is red in color. So that means Bootstrap was successfully linked with our project. So basically the setup for our Angular application has been complete and we can get into the coding part of our technical workshop. The setup is done now. Everything is done. Bootstrap is linked. The basic Angular project was created. Everything is done. Now we know the basics of what an Angular project structure is, what the node package manager is, how we can include whichever module we want in our Angular application. So till now we have learned all these things. We also saw what the entry point is, what the basics of components are. So I think that this is a good place to take a 5 minute break. And after the break, we will continue where we left off and we will get into the actual coding part of this technical workshop. So let's take a 5 minutes break.
Thank you, Karan. Let's utilize this break to introduce Riddhi Gohil, the head of Design and Marketing Department, to say a few words. Over to you, Riddhi.
Thank you, Ritu. Hello, learners. My name is Riddhi Gohil, and I'm the Design and Marketing Director at the Revolution Software Development Club. First of all, our club is completely run by students, and our motto is to spread industrial knowledge with our community. With We conduct webinars and workshops like this regularly. You can check them out on our channel. We conduct technical workshops as well as webinars with industrial professionals. As we know that the tech industry keeps changing, so we try to bring to you all the latest technologies and skills that are heavily used in the real world. We post content on our social media accounts daily. We post content like information about latest technologies, trending news, quizzes, memes, and much more. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter. We also post coding interview questions on our LinkedIn page. So if you are interested in that, then go ahead and follow us there too. The links to our social media accounts are provided down below in the description box. I'm sure you'll not be disappointed, so just check us out. To be informed about such future workshops and to become a member of our club, I hereby request you all to kindly join our Telegram group. The link to that is also provided in the description box. So I hope you get to learn new things today. Enjoy the workshop. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Riddhi. Thank you for that great introduction about what we do and what our club is. Let's keep the break and let's wait for a few minutes before we start getting into the details of the Angular framework. So let's wait for a few minutes. Okay, so let's get back into it. So where were we? So till now we have seen what the basics of a component is. As I mentioned that we can create our own components. So this app.component, this comes out of the box. It is provided by the Angular CLI itself. So now we will take a look as to how we can create our own components. So for that, what I normally like to do is I create another folder in my app folder. So I just normally call it components. There is no compulsion as to you have to name it components only. You can name it whatever you want, but according to the convention, I will name it components, and I will keep this folder within the app folder, which is inside the SRC folder. So within this components folder, we will be creating our own components. So in order to do that, in order to create our own components, we first need to stop the Angular application from being served. We first need to stop that, and we need to come to our root folder of the application, which is Angular SRC. And from here, we need to go to that components folder. So for that, I'll say cd src/app/components. So there we go. Now we are in the components folder. So Angular SRC app components. So here we will run a command which will create a component for us. So components, these are the basic building blocks of an Angular application. This is one of the main features that Angular provides. Basically, what they are encouraging us to do is that they encourage us to divide our application within different components. As in, normally we have in an application is a login page, a registration page, a home page, about page, etc. We can have other pages as well. So whatever page we want, whatever different pages we want in our project, we can differentiate those using components. So that is what the advantage of component is. So in order to create our own component, we have to run this command ng g for generate component and the name of our component. So first of all, I would like to create a home component. So you can run this command. This will also run, but there is a shortcut to run it as well. We can just say ng space g space c home. G stands for generate, C stands for component, and home stands for the name of that component. So you can provide whatever you want over here, whatever your component is responsible for, provide that name. So in our case, I want to create a home component. So I will say nggc home. Hit enter. It takes a few seconds and it creates these 4 files. It has created these 4 files. So let's take a look as to what it did. So here now the components folder is expandable, and here we can see 4 other different files. One is a component. Let me just expand this. Yeah. One is a home.component.html. Another is home.component.scss. Then home.component.spec.ts and home.component.ts. So let's go through them one by one. .html, as the name itself is telling us that here is where our markup will be. That's it. There is no other thing involved with this. Our markup will be in this file. Then the next file is .scss. Again, there is no other complications involved. Our styling will be in this file. Then next, if we take a look at this file. So this is something new. This is something different. We haven't seen this before. This is a component.spec.ts. So normally the .spec and the extension provided after that. .spec normally means that this file will be used for unit testing. So some of you may not know what unit testing is. Basically, we can write code for testing our own code. So when we create an application, we can write different code for testing our initial application. So those are what unit tests are. So if we want to run unit tests on our Angular application, there is this framework called as Karma. So using Karma, we can run unit tests, but we won't be getting into that as that is advanced topics of Angular. We won't be getting into too much details of that as this is the basics of Angular workshop. So yes, that is what the spec.ts stands for. We normally don't really mess with this file during the development phase. We do that during the testing phase. So then we have the home.component.ts file. In this file, this is the main file. This is the file where we write our entire base logic related to that particular component. So if it is home.component.ts, the entire logic of that component will be written in this file. The entire logic of that component will be written in this file. So let's try to understand as to what it is saying by default. We did not write this code. This was generated by the CLI. So let's try to understand. There is an import statement, and this is of ES6. This is ES6 style import statement. So as we have discussed this in the JavaScript workshop, there are multiple versions of JavaScript as well. So the latest current version is ES6, that is ECMAScript 6. It is basically a standardization of the JavaScript programming language. So I won't get into too much details because we have already done that in our previous workshop. So this is the ES6 style of importing something, and it is importing component and on init from the Angular core module. So when we were looking at the node modules folder, here we have everything that we are importing it from. So if we are saying Angular core, you can find that within this node modules. We are importing component and on init. So component basically is used for making our component and linking it to these files, the HTML and CSS. So here you can see within the component selector, this is normally called as a selector, and within that we have a selector, we have a template URL, and we have a styles URL. So here it has given the links to the different files of this component itself. The links to this component files itself. So we have .scss, we have .html, we have other files like the testing files. So here the selector is also given app-home, and as we saw previously, this app.component had app-root. So as we were including this app-root in our body in the entry file, that's how this component can also be linked with other components. So let's try that. On our HTML page, we have this p tag called as homebox. So let's try to link this app-root. I will hit save. I will go back to my source folder, which is angular-src, and I will hit ng save. Let's wait for it to compile. It is compiling. %, 30%, 50%. Okay, so it has been compiled successfully. Now, if we go to our browser and I just refresh, so when we are serving it initially, we have to refresh the page. Otherwise, if it has already been served, so then we don't have to refresh that page. So I believe that there is, yeah. So what mistake that we have made is that we are calling the same component within the same component. So that is why we have this. We don't want to call root, we want to call home. I'll just say app-home. I'll hit save. Let it compile again, and I will refresh manually. Yeah, so now we get homeworks. I'll just zoom in. We get homeworks. So the home component has been linked. So what I'll do is I'll just remove this markup from here and I'll put it within the home page itself so that we know everything is working fine. I'll hit Control plus K plus S. So Control plus K plus S, what that does is it saves multiple files at the same time. That is a shortcut in VS Code. So if you start saving one by one, so it will recompile every time. We don't want that. We want it to compile once. It is faster. So yes, app home component was included. If I go to my home component.ts file, if I change this selector to something else, I'll just say Karan. I'll say Karan, which is my first name. And in the root folder, I will say Karan dash home instead of app dash home. Let's see what happens now. So I change the selector over here and I am calling it with that same selector. So again, it worked. It worked. I'll just refresh again just to confirm. Yes, it works. So whatever selector you have provided, it will be linked through that selector itself. So we don't need to do that. We'll stick to the convention which Angular is providing us, app dash home. I'll just save this. So now we can start getting into the dynamic properties which Angular provides. So we can start getting into the dynamic properties. So let's go in the TS folder, .ts folder. And here we can see export class called as home component. This is the class name, home component, implements on init. So on init, we included this from Angular core module and it is implementing it. So in object-oriented programming, normally we implement a interface. So on init is an interface provided in the Angular core module and we are implementing that interface. And one of the properties of an interface is that the functions which are provided in an interface, they have to be defined. So if I remove this on init function, it gives me an error because that is a function declared in the on init interface. And if you don't provide the definition for it, it will give me an error. Another beauty of TypeScript, it gives you the error straight away. Unlike JavaScript, it will tell you at runtime. So this is, we have to implement the on init function. On init basically means whenever your component is initialized, whenever your component is called anywhere, it runs this on init method. So if I say console.log, I'll say home com initialize, home component initialize. I'll just hit Control KS so that all files are saved simultaneously. It was compiled successfully. It refreshed automatically. Now I will hit F12 on my keyboard and here you can see home component initialize was printed. I did not press anything. I did not do anything. It was just executed as this function was called. So ng on init is responsible for that. So now we have understood entirely what our TS file does. We also have a constructor. Again, from object oriented, if you are familiar, constructor is basically a function which is called whenever the object of this class is instantiated. Whenever the object of this class is instantiated, constructor is called. So this is related to the object whenever object is initialized, and this is related to the component. These are two different things. They do the same job, but two different things related to two different purposes. So yeah, ng on init. So here we can start creating different variables. I'll just create a variable called as, what can we say? I'll just say name for now. And we can assign a value to this. I'll just say hello. So why am I doing this? So here in the TS file, we have mentioned hello world. So instead of hard coding this exact string in my HTML file, I will interpolate the variable name as a string. This is string interpolation in Angular. In JavaScript, there was a different method of interpolating strings, but this is how strings are interpolated in Angular. And as these both files are already linked with each other, it will be able to tell what the name variable is. So if I hit Control K and S, save both files at the same time, it compiled, and again I got the same output as hello world, exact same output, but this time we dynamically took the value of that string from our TS file. So you see how easy it is to interpolate things on your markup. It is this easy, very easy to do this. So now let's create a bit complex logic. Let's create a bit complex logic, not too complex, a little complex. So another advantage that TypeScript provides is we can declare the type of the variable. So I can say colon and string. So this way, if I don't provide the colon, it will act as a JavaScript variable, which would be detected at runtime. But if I provide a colon and a data type, so we saw about different data types we have in JavaScript in our JavaScript workshop. So we can provide any of those data types with a colon over here. And according to that, it will decide as to what the data type of this would be. So it will immediately throw a compiler error saying if we pass a different value to it, if we say something like this, if I give it an array, so it gives me a error immediately because it is not assignable to type string. We can only provide a string. So this is the advantage. So again, I'll create a counter variable, initialize it to 0, giving it the number data type. And here we can create our own functions. We can create our own functions. So I'll create a function called as button click. And here I will say counter plus plus. I want to increment that counter whenever I click the button. This button click me, whenever I click it, I want to increment my counter. But here I am getting a error. So even if I make it the correct spelling, I'm still getting the error because according to the TypeScript syntax, whenever you are referring to the variables which are provided, which are part of that class instance, basically a data member, we have to use this keyword. So this dot counter. So this dot counter plus plus. So again, another object-oriented concept. This is referring to the same instance of this class, and this is the syntax for doing that. This dot counter. So we are logically doing this. So I want to call this function whenever I click that button. So again, it is very seamless to do that in Angular. I can just say click equal to the function name, which was button click. So what is happening over here? I will toggle my Bootstrap. Here we are specifying in parentheses click and equal to button click. So here basically we are saying that whenever this button is clicked, call this function, which is specified in the same components TS file. So it will call this button. And let's also print that counter over here. So I'll just give it a padding. I'll just give some padding to this. I'll say p dot, we can say h5. And I'll interpolate that counter. I'll hit Control KS, go to our page. You can see 0 is provided over here. If I say click me, it is incremented to 1. Again click, incremented to 2. Click 3. So that's how seamless it is. That's how seamless it is to change values in your DOM. That's how seamless it is to change values in your DOM using Angular. It is very easy. Like if I was to do this using vanilla JavaScript by itself, I would have to write a lot more code and it would be a lot complex than what we have done over here. So this is the beauty of Angular, and this feature is called as the change detection feature in Angular. So the way it does is also very seamless. It is very optimized and it is able to do it very seamlessly. It does it very quickly. You can see there is no lag or anything. You can see the changes being reflected according to what the user is doing. According to what the user is doing. So instead of calling this click me, I'll just say increment and I'll create another button. Before that, I'll create a span with padding of 2, just a span by itself. And I'll create another button and I'll give it a reset function, reset counter. Remember to always have your function names as descriptive as possible. I could have just said reset, but I said reset counter. So this dot counter is equal to 0. So this button, what it will do is, we'll just give this, we'll keep this at danger class. We'll make this primary for blue color. And I'll call this reset. I'll hit Control KS, save both files simultaneously. It compiled, refreshing the page. So we have now 2 buttons. One is increment and one is reset. We can increment using this button and we can reset the value. So that's how seamless it is. I just had to say this dot counter equals to 0. That's it. That's how easy it is. Yeah. So this is the basic features of what string interpolation is, what data binding is, and what property binding is. So these are the terms, these are the official terms which we have implemented over here. We don't need to remember what those terms are. We just need to know the syntax and how it works. So till now, we have learned a lot of basic features as to how we can run a function on a event, which would be a click event, how we can change the value using data binding. So here we are binding that data, how we can change the data using data binding, and how we can display it as well using string interpolation. So these are some of the basic features of Angular. So now you can now I hope that you are able to understand as to how the power of Angular can be utilized to make your applications dynamic. This is the exact definition of what a dynamic application is. According to the user's behavior, the application is able to change its markup. So this is what a dynamic application is. So these were just the basics. Now what we will do is we'll create a few more components. So for that, I need to stop the Angular CLI from serving my application. So I can do that by Control C. I pressed it twice. And now again, we need to go to that directory. So that was src app and components. Now we are in that directory. We can say nggc. We created the home component already. Now let's create the login component. Nggc login. Let's create another one called as register. Nggc register. Again, that was successfully created. I'll create another one called as about. So this is just a basic page. This is just a basic page about, and I'll create a navbar. So we'll see why we need a navbar. I'll create a component called as navbar. So these 4 components we created just now: login, register, about, and navbar. So if we take a look at our components folder, everything has been organized very well. About component is within the about folder, home component is within the home folder, login within login, etc. So these are the components which we just created through the Angular CLI. I'll just go back to my source folder, Angular SRC. Yes. So now we have created these 4 components, and again we can call any of these components wherever we want. So in my home component, I can call the navbar component. Within the navbar, I can call the login, and everything will be displayed as they are called one by one. So we can understand by looking at this and the index.html file, how it is working. It's the same way. We can call any component wherever we want using the selector. So in our case, navbar would be app navbar. So what I will do is in my app.component.html, instead of saying home, I'll say app navbar. App navbar. Just save. Yeah, so we need to serve it again. So ng-serve. It is giving me the error that there is no application as localhost 4200 because we did not serve it yet. So let's serve it. Yeah, compiled successfully. Refresh the page and it says navbar works. So basically we linked the navbar component. So now in order to create my navigation bar, what I will do is instead of going ahead and creating a navigation bar manually, what I will do is I will go to my Angular code folder. Here I have written down a basic navbar markup. So if you don't understand what this is, we have created the exact syntax, the exact navigation bar in our previous workshop. So there is no need for me to code this again because we have done this in the previous web design workshop, which is available on our YouTube channel. So I'm not going to code that again. I will just copy and paste. So yes, this is the basic navigation bar, and this is the basic styling for it. If I hit Control KS, go back to my browser, I get this. Let me zoom out. Yeah, I get this navigation bar. Home, about, login, and register. These are the four components that we have. And the navbar is a component in itself. So if we go to the about page, nothing happens. Login page, nothing happened. Register page, nothing happened. Because as I mentioned earlier, there is no such thing called as href in Angular. We basically have to link those components together. And another feature, this is a great segue into another feature of Angular, which is routing. So if you guys remember, while creating our project, we said yes for routing. So Angular routing has been enabled by default in our project. So we need to create a router between these components and link that router in our navbar component.html so that we can navigate to any file that we want using that router. So in order to create a router, we need to go to this file called as app.module.ts, and in this file all your components are present, whichever component that we created. So app component came here by default. These are the 5 components that we created. These are all linked over here, and this is how Angular is able to identify these components as a component. So what do I mean by that? Here we have specified that this is a component. So by including it in the app.module.ts, it is able to detect those components. App component came by default. App routing module, this was imported. This was also imported by default because we said yes to routing. So similarly, we need to include the router module. So I'll just say import router module. And we also need another package called as routes. We'll see what these are. From at Angular dash route. So we have to include these 2 modules. So let's create the routes for our application. So the way I do it normally is I create a constant, a variable called as routes, and I give it a data type of routes. So this data type belongs to this one, which we are importing from the Angular router module. So this data type is this. And here we need to create the different routes that we. So within this, if you want to create different routes, it is basically an array of objects, and those objects contain those objects by default contain 2 key values, which is a path. So first route I will create for the home component, and path would be blank, and component. We need to specify the component, so I need to say home component. So this component, this and these 2 are we are referring to the same thing. Component, home component, and path is nothing. Similarly, we'll create paths for other components as well. So I'll just say login. So I need to say login component. Then I'll say register. I'll link the register component. I will say about. Here I will link the about component. So yeah, I guess we have only 4 modules. Let's delete the last one. And now we have this another add symbol over here called as ng module. And within this, we have few different arrays. One is a declarations array, one is imports array, one is providers, and one is Bootstrap. So let's go bottom to top. Bootstrap here is not referring to the framework that we use for building responsive GUI. It's not that. It is saying that our first component, our main component is the app component. So Bootstrap your application from here. That is the meaning of this. We can specify any component we want. This is the default component that comes with the Angular project. Then we have providers. Normally we mention the services that we create or the directives that we create. So services and directives, those are advanced topics in Angular. We won't get into those today. If you want to learn those and if you are eager to learn those, then in the feedback form we will be providing, you can you can let us know that you are interested in learning the advanced topics as well. So we don't mind taking another workshop on this. So yeah, providers, we won't be worrying too much about that. Then we have the imports array. So in this imports array, we specify the external modules that we are including, like the app routing module that is given over here, browser module, which is also required by Angular, given over here. Then we have the declarations array. Within the declarations, all our components are specified. App component, home component, all the components that we create. So these are automatically added when we run the ngGC command. These components are automatically added over here. We don't have to do anything. Now we just need to import the routing module because we have imported it at the top, but we are not referencing it. So we have to say router module dot for route, and we need to provide the routes. So this routes, no semicolon. Yeah, this routes is this this array of objects that we created. For route basically means that router module has to use these routes. So I believe we have successfully created a routing API in our application. Now let's save. It compiled successfully, so no errors. It refreshed automatically. Now if I say /login, okay, so I don't get anything because in the app.component.html, I need to give the router module. I need to specify the router module, so I can say router-outlet. Yes, router-outlet / router-outlet. Basic HTML syntax, but Angular is doing this so that it knows. So that's why tag open, tag close. Now if I save, go back, now we get login works over. We are at /login. If I go to /register, I get register works. If I go back, I get my home component, which we created, increment and reset, which we created initially. So our router is set up, but it is not linked with our navigation bar. See, it is not working if I press on any of these buttons. So we need to link our router with our navigation bar as well in the HTML file of it. So in order to link this, first of all, we don't use hrefs, as I said, we use event binding properties. So the event binding property for linking a external component for using the router is router link, and you give it a value using equal to sign, double quotes. Within this, you create an array, and inside this, you give the single quote of /. So we know that home component is our first component that the user should see. So I'll just say / over. Copy and paste this in other components as well, and I will provide different links. So about will go to about /about. Login will go to /login. This is just the syntax of Angular. This array and providing it a string value. So this is just the syntax. And yeah. So lastly, register. If I hit save, go back to our application. Now if I go to about, okay, something might have gone wrong. Let's try to debug. Is everything linked correctly? Is there any errors? Yeah, so this is about should be small a. I'll just save. If I go to about, so about works. Login, so login works. Register, so register works. So yeah, there actually sometimes small errors like this, a spelling mistake, can cause a lot of issues in your application. Angular is definitely not perfect in finding these things because this is a user error. Because in the routing, I could have easily said capital A over here and capital A over here as well. So how is Angular supposed to know that? So this is just some debugging you have to do for errors like that because it was not working initially, but now it is working. See, if we go to any component, I'm clicking on any of the components. I'll just zoom in a little bit. Yeah, about works, login works, register works, and the home page. Everything is working seamlessly. And do you notice that the page is not being refreshed? So as I mentioned earlier, a single page progressive web application, it is basically a single page application only. No matter how many components you include, it will always be a single page application. It will just de-render a component and render another component. So it will remove register works, it will add login works. It will remove login works, it will add about works. That's how Angular works. Yeah. Okay, I'll zoom out. So our router has been successfully included. Now uh, we can add some other properties as well for making it a bit user friendly. This is not compulsory. So in order to make it user friendly, we can say router link active, give it same syntax, create an array in that provide a name. So basically what this is doing is that if your router link is active, so add the active class to this li. Add the active class to this li. So if it is active, what it will do is it will add a class like this. If it is not active, it will remove the class. So that's how this is working. So we will add this to all the LIs in our navigation bar. And in my SCSS file, I'll create a active class. And whenever it is active, change the color of that link. I'll say color equals to red. I'll hit Control KS, go back to our project, and now we can see whenever we are on a particular link, that link is highlighted. But you can also see a problem over here that home is always highlighted. Home is always highlighted no matter what page we go on. And that is happening because here the part to home is blank and part to other components we have given a name. So basically it is thinking that both are active at the same time, even though they are not. So there is a small fix for this. Again, this is a user-friendly feature, not a compulsion to do this. So whenever you have a component like the home component, which we have in our case, there is another event we can bind, router link active options. And you can, again, same syntax, but over here, instead of creating a array, we'll create an object exact true. It says, this is just the syntax. We are adding a router link active options. And if it is exactly true, then only add this active class, otherwise don't. So if we take a look, now everything is working fine. Whichever component we are on, it is highlighting that name in the navigation. So see how dynamic Angular is. Now you can understand what different features Angular provides. So these were two of the event bindings. There are a lot of different event bindings for a lot of different tags in HTML. So now, once you understand the basics, you can do this with any tag you want. You can do it in any component you want. So this is how it can be made dynamic. So basically the routing part is also done. Another basic feature, another important feature of Angular that is done. So now let me close everything just so we are on the same page. I have closed everything. I've collapsed everything. I'm going into the SRC folder now, app folder components. I'll go to the home folder. And in the home.component.ts file, now we have seen how we can interpolate strings, numbers, basically variables. Now let's see how we can interpolate an object. So I'll create an object. And I'll just say name : I'll just give my name. And I'll give another property as from. So I'm from Pune. So I created this basic object in my TS file. Now how can I display this object? So for that, I'll just create a div with some padding. And here I'll say t.h4 of interpolate that obj object and call the property of name. We'll do the same with from. Instead of h4, I'll say h5 now. And obj.from. If I hit Control KS, both files were saved at the same time, compiled, and it was refreshed. We are on the about page. Let's go to home. So here you can see Karan Jagtiani and Pune. So basically, this is how we can interpolate objects as well. We can do a array of objects to array of objects. If I have multiple objects, let's say. So now instead of saying my name, I'll just go with some fictional names. I'll say Michael Scott. He is from Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you understand this reference, then let me know in the chat box. Let me know in the live chat box if you understand this reference. I'll create another person called as Jim Halpert, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I'll create another Dwight Schrute, again from Scranton. Now we have this array of objects created. If I hit save and if I go back to our browser, nothing is displayed because it is an array now. It is not a single object. So it doesn't know which object which object that I'm talking about. Am I talking about the first one, second one? It doesn't. So it doesn't print at all. So for that, there is a for loop in Angular. We can run a for loop within the HTML itself. I can say let person of obj. So obj is our array and person would be an instance of our array. It is basically saying as if for I is equal to 0, I is less than the length of that and I plus plus. And in this case, we would say obj of I. So this is basically person refers to this obj of I. That's how we can understand it at an abstract level. If I say person.name, person.from, I'll hit save. So all of those three are printed. So we can have n number of objects in this array, and those n number of objects will be printed one by one using the for loop in the markup of the HTML file. So this is basically a for loop. This is how we can create a for loop. Similarly, we can create if conditions as well. So you can basically have the concepts of a programming language within your HTML file itself. So now, instead of hard coding these values in my obj array, I want to dynamically take input from the user, and based on taking input from the user, I want to create these objects. So for that, I would need, let's first remove this entire array. Let's make it blank. And for this, I would need a form basically. So I'll again create a class of P2. Just some padding between the two divisions. Yeah, just some padding. And here I want to create a form. So form, currently I don't want any actions. And in this, I would create an input, type text, and I'll give this a placeholder of enter name. I'll create another input and I'll say enter from. I'll add a few line breaks over here because by default they are not added. So I need to save this file as well. I did not save both at the same time. Yes, so now we have these two form fields. Let's create a button as well for submitting the form. So button type equals to submit. If you are not understanding as to what I'm doing, again, I would encourage you to go and check out our web design workshop. And here I will provide the class, so btn success. So the success class means green color. Yeah, I need to give it a name as well. I'll add the line breaks too. Yeah, and I'll say submit. Now let's see what we get. Yeah, so we get name, from, and submit. So now I want to take input from the user and dynamically add objects to that array. So how can I do that? So basically we have created a form, but this is not an Angular form. So what I want to do is I want to create an Angular form, and I'll tell you the reason why. So in order to create an Angular form, we need to include that module as well, just like we included the router module. So we need to include the forms module as well. So for that, we need to say import forms module and reactive forms module from same Angular add forms, Angular/forms. So here we are including forms module, and we are also including the reactive forms module. We'll see as to what they are. So as we have included it, we have imported it, we need to include it as well. So I'll say forms module, and I'll say reactive forms module as well. No need to type it again. I'm just copying and pasting. I'll just save to make sure that there are no errors. So I did not get any errors. So it was imported successfully. So now in my home.component.ts file, I want to create a form variable. Just like we created the objects array, just like we created the number variable, string variable, we can also create a form variable, which is called as a form group. So let's import that form group. Then we also need form control, and we also need validators. We'll see what these are exactly. Let me first include it. So from @Angular/form, yeah, including the forms module. So form group, form control, and form validators. So let's create our form variable. I'll just say add person form, and I'll give it the type of form group. So I gave it the type of form group, and now we need to instantiate this form group. So I'll say this.addPersonForm. Again, basic syntax of this dot for referencing to the data member of this class itself. So new form group, and this is the basic syntax of this. The syntax of form group is this, and here you can see Visual Studio Code is gracefully providing us with the prototype of that function. So it expects form controls as a key value pair. So we have already provided the object syntax over here. So now we just need to provide the keys and values. So one is the name key. So we need to say new form control. And in this, we have to provide this syntax. I will explain it. Validator dot required. We'll do the same with from. So basically, we are creating a form, and this form expects two values, and these values are required. So this means that if they are not filled, and if we try to submit, it will not submit because both of them are required, and we are creating a form control. So this is what this syntax means. So we have created this in our component.ts file. Let me just save and make sure that nothing is going wrong. Okay, it is compiled successfully. These were errors before. Now it is compiled successfully. Now let's try to include that form within this markup. So I can say form group equals to add person form. That's it, add person form. And within the input type, I can give it a form control name of name. So what it is doing is that it is linking that form group with this form, with this markup of the form we created in the HTML file. And now it will check what parameters it has. So we have name and we have from. So we need to provide the form control name to two different inputs compulsorily. So I'll just copy and paste that, give this the from. Let's save this. Try to compile. It was compiled successfully again. I believe there are no errors. Yes, there are no errors. So the form group was linked and the form control name was also linked. So now let's create a submit event. So here we have given the type of submit. I can also say type equals to button, and we can create a on click event over here, or we can create a on submit over here. So I want to create a on submit. I will say submit form. I'm creating a function called submit form, and I will call this, I'll create the definition of this function in my TS file. Here I'll just say console.log submit click just to test it once. This is recommended to do before going any further, so that we know that there are no errors. So when I click on submit, it says submit button is clicked. You can see in the console. So now submit button has been linked with this function. So here what I want to do is I want to get the value from those input fields. So I'll say let name equals to this dot add person form dot controls. I'll explain the syntax. Controls of name dot value. Let me just console.log this name. Hit save. Let's see what output we get. I hit save. I'll just say current. Submit. So I get submit click, which is the first console log, and current, which is the second console log. So basically what I did over here is that I am referencing the data member, which is the add person form, which is of type form group. And the type form group has a parameter called as controls. And within that controls parameter, it is basically an object. And within that object, there are the properties which you provided in the form group within the ng on init. So this has the properties. This is an object. It has all those properties. And one of them is name. So I can reference it like this. And I want to get the value of that property. That is basically the syntax. We can do the same for from. And I'll do from. I'll print both of them, comma separated. From. Yes, Control KS, save all files together. I'll just say test2. So I get test and test2 both. But if I remove this and if I hit submit, I still get submit is clicked and I still get this value as empty. So I don't want that. I want both of these fields to be required. So how can we do that? I can have a basic if condition over here. If this dot add person form dot invalid. So there is a property to this form called as invalid. And if I say it, if it is not invalid, then only print. If it is not invalid, then print this. Else, you can say both fields are not provided. Let me save and let's test this out. So if I just do submit, both fields are not provided. If I add a value over here, both fields are again not provided. If I add a value to both fields, I get the values. So submit clicked and I get both the values which I only inputted. So now, since we have the basic logic created, what we can do is we can utilize this same objects array and add a object dynamically to that array. So I'll just say this dot obj dot push. So push is a function. We covered this in our previous workshop. I will add an object. Key value name will be name, and key value from will be from. Key of name will be this variable name, and key of from will be this variable from. So from key will be equal to from this variable. So now let's see what happens. So if I add a value over here, Karan and Pune, submit. So see, I got this value dynamically. So I am able to take the input from the user. I can say current to, I get another object. I can keep on adding. It's up to me. I can keep on adding. It will basically push it to that array. And once it is pushed, Angular will be able to detect that change. And once upon detection, it will render that change. If I remove this, it won't submit because both fields are not provided. See, nothing is happening. So this is how you can dynamically add a property to your DOM using the form group and form validators. So we have also seen another basic feature of Angular, which are form group, reactive forms module, and the form validators. So the reactive form module basically means it is responsible for this thing. When we specify the form group, it is reactive in nature. As in whatever we define within our TS file, it would react according to that. So basically that is the meaning of reactive forms. And form module is the basic controls which are provided by the Angular forms module. So those basic classes, they are provided through through forms module, and the reactive forms module is responsible for this form group, for reactively adapting to the form group which we create in our TS file. So that is basically the meaning of it. Now let's add another feature. Let's say I want to delete a particular person. I'll say button class of btn danger, and I'll say delete. And here I will add a event property of click, and I will give it a function called as remove person, a function, and I will provide that name of that function. So based on the name, I want to delete a object from my list. So remove person, passing a parameter. So you can also pass parameters like this to your functions. So remove person, I will just define that function in my TS file. So remove person. Here I'm passing the name, so I will accept it as this variable name called as just name. So now I want to remove that particular object from my array of objects based on the name property of that particular object. So here we have multiple objects. So I want to remove a particular object based on the name property every object has. So the naive approach of doing this would be, I would say, for let I is equal to 0, run till the length of objects, and whenever you find that, when you can say if equal to name, so then delete. There is a function called as delete as well. You can say delete and then that object. That is the naive approach of doing this. There is a single line approach which we can do using JavaScript. I'll say this dot add person, no, not add person, this dot obj is equal to this dot obj. There is a function called as filter, and within this filter I'm using ES6 syntax. Item dot name is not equal to name. So see how beautiful this line of code is. Within a single line, I can do the same thing which 3 or 4 lines of code would do. And this is much more efficient than the conventional approach or the naive approach. Here, basically what I'm saying is this dot obj dot filter, and I am passing a item parameter, and it will iterate through all the items within that array of objects. So every object will be referred to as item, and it will iterate through it till the length of that array. So iterate through that, and if that object's name is not equal to name, so add it back to the array. So basically, using this syntax, we are removing the items that we want. So if I control K and S this, I can save both files simultaneously. Now I will add Karan, Pune, submit. I'll say Karan 2 and Karan 3 so that we know these 3 are different objects. Karan as it is Karan 2 and Karan 3. Now here we added the button within the ng for, so that is the reason why we are getting these multiple delete buttons. So if I delete Karan 2, so Karan 2 was deleted. 1 remained as it is, 3 also remained as it is. Now I can delete 1. So 1 was deleted. 3 was not deleted. I can delete that. I can add anything, I can delete anything. I can add multiple, but if it has the same name, so it will delete all of them because we are only checking from the name parameter. So if you want to make it a little more complicated, you can create IDs for every object so that you don't delete all the objects at the same time if you have the same name. But I am sure that you would be able to code that logic on your own, and I don't need to show you how exactly it could be done. Also, I see that we are running out of time. So this is what basically the Angular framework is. Till now, we saw all the basic features of Angular. May it be, we initially saw the project structure, how the what the entry point of the application is, what components are, how components can be linked with each other, and if we want to create a router, basically a navigation API in your application, so how we can do that using the routing module. Then we also saw some other basic features such as string interpolation, then data binding, then also event binding. So a submit event or a click event, we also saw these. These are also features of Angular. Then we also saw property binding, which we did in the navigation bar. So these were the properties and classes were added accordingly as to the behavior of that component. So we also saw what property binding is. And then after that, we saw what the forms module is, how we can create a form, how we can validate that form as well. So in our case, we were just printing in the console that both fields are required. But if you remember from our JavaScript workshop, we looked at as to how errors can be thrown dynamically. So you can use the same logic here. You can create a tag within your HTML, give it a ID, and using that ID, use the get element dot ID function, and using the inner HTML property, you can throw the same error. So I won't get into that because we have already covered that in our previous workshop. So if you want to display a error to the user, because user won't be looking at the console, he will look at the markup itself. So you can display an error over here that it is a required field. So we saw what form groups are, what form validators are, and what form control is. So these were the basic features of Angular. And before we conclude the workshop, I would like to show you what the assignment is. So in order to receive a certificate from our organization, you have to complete this assignment. So currently my team will also be sharing this assignment with you on the group, on the WhatsApp group. So this is the assignment. You basically have to create 4 different components: home, login, register, and about. Then you also have to link Bootstrap to your Angular project. Then we need to create a navigation bar with routing. And then within the register component, we need to create a registration form. You can have n number of form fields in that registration form as per your wish. In our case, we just did name and from. You can do all the necessary requirements for registering a user, like email, name, username, password, etc. And you have to make a submit button below that form. And upon submission, the user which was created has to be displayed like this. The user which was created has to be displayed like this. So the difference is we did this in the home page. You have to do it in the registration. You have to do it in the registration component. Same logic, and you can have different parameters according to your convenience. So this is basically what the assignment is. If you have any doubts regarding the assignment, you can contact us anytime. Our numbers are provided in multiple places, so you can contact us anytime. This is the assignment, and the last date for submitting this assignment is the 25th. So next Sunday, 25th, that is the last date to submit this assignment. And as there are people who submit the assignments during different times, some people submit it immediately, some people take time. So that is why we will be providing all the certificates after the deadline is complete. So you will receive your certificate for completing the assignment, a certificate of completion from our organization after the 25th. So if you have submitted and if you don't immediately receive a certificate, don't worry, we have your details. You will receive a certificate, but not immediately. So yes, this is the assignment. So yeah, this was basically the workshop on the Angular framework. I hope that you guys learned some new things in this. I hope that you enjoyed this workshop. So yes, this this is it from my side. The technical part of the workshop is over. The assignment is also provided. You have 1 week to complete that assignment. So Thank you everyone for patiently listening to my workshop. Thank you.